the continuing work of the oversight committee and indeed the push from those Republicans that I mentioned, notably Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, also Nancy Mace, will definitely mean that it's not out of the agenda at all. And they will be, of course, pushing for further transparency on this case.
Now, every Tuesday, we head to the US to find out what's happening in Washington. And Lara Spirit is our woman cartwheeling through the corridors of power. And she joins me now. Hello, Lara.
Hi, Hugo. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being with us. Let's start off by talking about what's going on with Epstein and Trump, all that. Democrats in Congress have released what they say is a note from Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein, written in a birthday book compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell for the sex offender's 50th birthday. The Wall Street Journal reported that Trump had sketched a drawing depicting a woman's breast and a Donald signature into the message, which concluded with the line, "Happy birthday and may every day be another wonderful secret." An image fitting that description was released by the Oversight Democrats' official X account. Lara, how's this story going down in the US?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Republicans are less nervous about this particular iteration of it than they perhaps were earlier on in the summer. We've certainly not had an outpouring of anxiety from his MAGA base in the way that we previously might have. So Laura Loomer, for example, this calls this a fake story. Charlie Kirk called it fake. These are pro-Trump activists with large followings on social media who largely, I think, have confirmed the idea that there's a large amount of unity within the Republican Party at this point anyway, and that those Republicans who are speaking out in favor of greater transparency at this time largely are confined to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, Thomas Massey. These are albeit Republicans not necessarily at the moment commanding a huge amount of support for this particular movement, given that the Trump administration has argued for quite a bit of time now that it's a Democrat hoax, that it's been concocted to damage Trump and to damage the Republican Party and to distract from things like immigration and deportation agendas that they feel is very successful. So we heard from Caroline Leavitt, who is, of course, the White House press secretary, who said it's very clear he didn't sign this signature. It's fake news to perpetuate a Democrat Epstein hoax. And that's the line that you'll hear again and again today. We have a press briefing with her around lunchtime. We also will have Trump in front of press later on this afternoon. And you can imagine when both are asked about this that they will make much the same case.
Where does this story go from here? Because, I mean, they say it's fake. Other people say it's not fake. How does this move on?
Well, it's a very good point. And I mean, the continuing work of the Oversight Committee and indeed the push from those Republicans that I mentioned, notably Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, also Nancy Mace, will definitely mean that it's not out of the agenda at all. And they will be, of course, pushing for further transparency on this case. And the committee is continuing its work. So certainly we're a long way off saying we're not going to be talking about this anymore. But I think we can see where the party lines have crystallized, and we're not in a place anymore where we're saying this is a total disaster for the MAGA movement, who are completely divided on this. It does seem like there is more control from the Trump administration of the narrative on this question at the moment.
And look, we should say Peter Mandelson, the UK's ambassador in Washington, gets a mention as well. What's happening there?
Yes, it refers to Epstein in this birthday note as his best pal, and his spokesman last night saying that Lord Mandelson regrets ever being introduced to Epstein.
Right, okay. The Trump administration also says it's launched Operation Midway Blitz in Illinois. Tell us about Operation Midway Blitz.
Well, we don't have the full details of this yet, but you will know, of course, and we've spoken about this before, Hugo, that there has been a lot of conversations about whether or not President Trump will send the National Guard into Chicago, a city which he says is ridden with crime, and following on from his federal takeover of Washington, D.C., and indeed the deployment of National Guard agents to L.A. Previously, he has seemingly had this city in his sights, and both he and J.B. Pritzker, the Democrat governor of Illinois, have been trading barbs about this question for weeks and weeks, and everyone has been waiting on tenterhooks to see just when Trump goes in. Indeed, when he's asked about this, he's pretty coy, but he does say that he said at times, we will go into Chicago. And then actually last week, he seemed to say all they need to do is ask. In other words, we may not necessarily, but we might want them to ask for this to happen. And of course, we know that both JB Pritzker and Chicago's Democrat mayor are very, very vanishingly unlikely to ever ask for this support. So at that point, he started mentioning other places. So Portland, Oregon, he mentioned for the first time recently. He'd watched it on TV. He said he seemingly thought there was lots of crime there too. So there's been a question as to whether or not perhaps he was going cold on the idea of Chicago as his next target for kind of his crime and immigration agenda. And then yesterday, ICE launched Operation Midway Blitz, circulated online on social media with mugshots of almost a dozen, 11 foreign-born men who it said should be deported. So this isn't the National Guard yet, but this is a uptick in immigration enforcement in the city and could well be a prelude to something more. So for that reason, obviously, people watching Chicago very closely today.
I mean, there was that post he put on Truth Social earlier in the week where he said Chicago was about to find out why it was called the Ministry of War. Why is he doing this? What's this all for? Is he really worried about rising crime rates? Is there some other political calculation going on here?
I mean, there was polling released earlier this week, or indeed at the end of last week, which showed that Trump has actually been growing more popular with Republicans recently. And that is largely, they suggest, down to the fact that despite all of the narratives around the economy being the most important thing that voters care about, for Republicans, actually, crime and immigration are top of their agenda. And so talking about this, particularly in circumstances where at the moment there is some sticky economic news for the Trump administration. So, we'll have new jobs data out this morning as well that some in the White House will be probably quite worried about seeing. This is something which really unites Trump's base, also his supporters more broadly, and also that they feel puts Democrats in a difficult position because they feel it forces them to say either crime isn't that bad, you're picking, you're trying to go after criminals, and actually it's a disproportionate response when actually quite a lot of voters don't necessarily feel that crime has gone down, even if the statistics in some places might show that it has. So for that reason, they feel like this is a very strong issue, and one of the reasons why they're going to push on this, I think, in the weeks and months to come.
I mean, traditionally, the Republicans particularly did have this sort of a libertarian wing that probably would have thought that putting troops on the streets of American cities was a bad thing. Have they just all completely disappeared?
I think that there is a widespread consensus among Republicans and supporters of Trump that this is a clearly winning issue and something which should be top of their agenda. It's something that Trump, you'll hear, because as you know, we have, whenever there's an event in the White House that Trump speaks at and there are questions after and he's given the chance to sort of roam free in his responses, more often than not at the moment, he does come back to talking about crime and immigration. And they feel like their deportation agenda, which of course has had a massive amount of new funding in the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill that was passed narrowly in Congress recently, is an opportunity to step this up. And that's why you see things like Alligator Alcatraz, for example, that controversial immigration detention center in the Everglades in Florida. It's also why you see, as I'm sure we'll talk about, the raid of that Hyundai LG plant in Georgia, which has caused a diplomatic rift in some respects with South Korea. So this is something that the Trump administration wants to do. They want to talk about doing it as well. And they are very, very confident that it's popular with their voters and actually with a wider slice of the public at large.
Let's talk about another immigration story that people might have missed while I've got you. The South Korean government is sending a charter plane to the United States to retrieve hundreds of workers detained in an immigration raid in Georgia. What's happened here?
Yes, so this is a massive story, and it was one of the biggest immigration raids in US history. Some 300 South Korean nationals were detained. Some of them were whisked away in handcuffs and leg chains by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, by ICE. And that's at the plant that's under construction in southern Georgia, the Hyundai LG facility. Now, South Korean President Lee, who of course was welcomed at the White House recently, and is in a tense place with President Trump anyway, because they've got questions about tariffs, which have been very, very difficult. They've also got questions about strategic flexibility and realignment, whether or not there should be American troops that are focusing more on China. And Lee wants to balance his relationship with China very carefully at the moment. So there are big, big questions for that relationship at the moment. And this came at pretty much the worst time. Lee saying they must have been greatly shocked by this sudden event, speaking, of course, of those who were detained, adding that he felt a profound sense of responsibility for the safety of Korean citizens. Now, they are going to return on a chartered flight later this week, possibly as early as Wednesday. And for, I think, Lee acting very, very quickly on this issue and making it very, very clear clear that they don't think that this was at all acceptable. And I think it's not clear that the Trump administration is going to stop doing this. But it is clear that leaders of other countries around the world who might be looking at South Korea and thinking that some of their nationals could face the same fate will be mulling what they would do in a similar situation.
Fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. That is Lara Spirit there, speaking to us from Washington. Good to speak to you as always, Lara.